Welcome back, grade 7 and 8. In this video, we are going to be taking a look at not only light, but how is it that light works to create colors, to allow us to be able to see the variety of different colors all around us. At one time, people believed that color was something added to light. So when white light struck a green leaf, people believed the leaf was actually adding green to the light, which is what caused it to be green. Is color picked up though when light strikes a colored object? Or does light itself contain color? Well, this is what we're going to be exploring a bit more. In the 17th century, English scientist Sir Isaac Newton conducted a famous experiment. He placed a prism, which is that object that we see, that triangular glass object. He placed a prism so that a thin beam of white light could pass through it. When white light traveled through the prism, Newton saw bands of color emerge. He observed that each band of color was refracted at a different angle. So this is all about refraction. And as it travels through an object, the different colors refract different amounts, causing them to separate or split apart. This produced a rainbow effect that we see here. Newton concluded that the prism was not the source of the colors, but the different colors must have been present already in the white light. Next, Newton tried something else. He passed these colors through a reverse prism. This time, though, only white light emerged. In this way, Newton showed that color was a property of visible light. He proposed then that white light, such as sunlight, is the result of mixing together all the different colors of light. When white light is refracted into different colors, the resulting pattern is called a spectrum. For sunlight, the colors range from red through orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. This pattern is something that we call the solar spectrum. I always remember the solar spectrum by thinking of Roy G. Biv. So Roy G. Biv is red, orange, yellow, Roy G. green, Biv blue, indigo, violet. A rainbow is a classic example of a spectrum where we can see that range of colors going from red to violet. When light strikes an object, the light may be reflected off the object, absorbed by the object, or transmitted through the object. So we have all sorts of different options taking place. When light hits an object, it can be reflected off it, it can be absorbed by it, or it can go through it. When white light passes through a blue bottle, for example, the glass absorbs all the colors of light except for blue. Only the blue light is reflected or transmitted. This explains why a bottle appears blue. This is really important and key here. So the reason why something is the color red is because it is absorbing every wavelength of color except red. And it's the red wavelength that ends up getting reflected back to our eyes, and that causes it to be the color red. A blue bottle here is absorbing all the wavelengths of light from white light except the color blue. And that's the color that ends up being reflected back to our eyes, which causes us to see it as the color blue. The color you see when light strikes an opaque object depends on which colors are reflected and which ones are absorbed. Paper on a page, for example, reflects all the colors. Thus, we usually see paper as white. The print on a page usually absorbs all the colors, therefore we see the print as black. Any colors that you see in a colored picture, for example, depend on the color of light reflected from that picture. Let's take a look at these tomatoes. We have a pretty interesting example here. A tomato under white light, the top middle one there, looks red. And the reason for that is because it is reflecting only red light to our eyes. But what happens to all the other colors if only red light is reflected? Well, the other colors have been absorbed by the skin of the tomato. In our second picture, in picture B here, um, the tomato still appears red. We're now using a red light. The tomato still appears red because red light is not absorbed by the tomato. I mean, the whole thing looks red, but the tomato still looks red there. However, in our third picture, the tomato is illuminated by only blue light. Blue light is almost completely absorbed by the tomato, and so very little light can actually reflect back to us. Therefore, in that picture, the tomato actually kind of looks black with just a hint of blue to it. So it's kind of an interesting little experiment there when we're taking a look at what happens to different objects as we use different colored light, particularly if the color that gets reflected back to us is not present in that light either. The three colors red, green, and blue are called additive primary colors. This is really interesting here. You'll notice that I didn't say red, yellow, and blue, but I said red, green, and blue. And that's because these are the primary colors, the additive primary colors of light, which is different than the primary colors of paint that we might learn about, or the primary pigments that you might learn about in art class. Red, green, and blue are our additive primary colors. They are called additive colors because adding all three together in this proper amount will make white light. So we have red here, we have green here, we have blue here, and in the middle where they all meet together, we get the color white. In this picture here, the light of two additive primary colors will produce a secondary color. The three secondary colors are yellow, cyan, and magenta. So when we mix red and green light together, we get yellow light. When we mix green and blue light together, we get cyan, and red and blue light make magenta. Interestingly enough, these are our three main colors, yellow, magenta, and cyan, that we use primarily in printer ink as well. Some TV screens and computer monitors also use additive primary colors in order to show different light as well. What they're doing is that each pixel usually has the opportunity to be either red, green, or blue to different amounts. And depending on the amount of red, green, or blue that is present, you'll end up combining to make different colors on that particular pixel of that particular screen. Now, how is it though that we see color? Well, the retina of our human eye, something that we talked about previously, contains two types of cells that respond to light. Some cells look like tiny cylinders, and these cells we call rods, and they detect the presence of light. The other cells are called cones, again because of their shape. They're shaped like cones. And the cones detect color. There are three types of cones, and each type of cone responds to a different additive color. Think again about the spectrum produced by a prism. We can recall that white light contains red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. However, cones in the human eye respond mainly to red, green, and blue. This is why the eye can be tricked into thinking that a beam of light is white when it contains only those three colors. This is also why all other colors are seen by the eye in terms of the relative amounts of red, green, and blue light that's sensed by these cones. Signals from all three types of cone cells and rod cells travel along our optic nerve to our brain. Your brain then interprets the shape and color of the objects that we see. The cone cells, though, in some people's eyes are unable to detect certain colors. This condition is known as color blindness. And here is a quick picture that you may have done going to the eye doctors that they use in order to try to detect color blindness, which is really just an inability for those cone cells to properly determine which color light they are seeing and to properly discern between those different colors. Well, that gives a little bit of a glimpse, no pun intended, to you on how we see colors in the world around us. And to be honest, I am super thankful that God designed us this way. God designed us to be able to not only see the world around us in colors, but just think about how much richer that makes the world for it. Think about what the world would be like without any color in anything. And when we start to do that, it really makes me appreciate the way that God designed us to be able to see colors the way that we do.